What price would you pay to keep one child safe when 17 others are in danger? January 1910, Lawrence, Massachusetts. An 11-year-old mill worker stands between roaring looms and a choice no adult would make. By dawn, a list of names surfaces, children slated for a deadly machine. Months later, a single photograph hidden under a mill floor will force the past into the open. Stay with me. I'm about to walk you through this dramatized story, inspired by real child labor records, from first whisper to final reckoning. Before we begin, if stories like this help you see history's human cost, subscribe, like, and tell us which city you're watching from. It helps this channel surface dramatized, history-inspired investigations the algorithm usually buries, and it keeps these lessons alive for the next episode. This photograph was discovered in 1978, tucked inside a leather journal buried beneath the foundation of an abandoned textile mill in Lawrence, Massachusetts. But look closer at the girl's hands. Those aren't the hands of a child who plays with dolls. Those are the hands of someone who knows what it means to sacrifice everything. And if you stay until the end, you'll discover why she's smiling in this photo, even though she knew that in less than 2 hours, her entire world would crumble forever. This is the story of a girl who saved 17 lives by losing the only thing she had left. The photo shows a girl of maybe 11 years old, standing in front of massive textile machines. Her dress covered in cotton dust, her fingers bent at unnatural angles. But it's her eyes that haunt you. They're the eyes of someone twice her age, someone who carries a secret so heavy it could destroy families. National Archives, Lewis Hine Collection, 1910. Notice something strange about her smile. It's not the smile of an innocent child. It's the smile of someone who just made an impossible decision. A decision that would cost her everything she loved. A decision that would save children she'd never even met. This is Emma Kowalski, 11 years old, daughter of Polish immigrants, working 16 hours a day at the Everett cotton mill. The only person in her entire factory brave enough to do what no adult dared to do, based on mill employment records and immigrant registration documents from Ellis Island. But Emma carried a secret that not even her own mother knew. A secret that lived in her twisted fingers and in the scars hidden beneath her sleeves. Because on that day, one wrong move meant watching her baby brother die. And she had exactly until sunset to choose between saving him or saving 17 other children from the same fate that had already claimed her father's life. What she didn't know was that the factory foreman had been watching her every move for 3 weeks, waiting, plotting. Because Emma wasn't just another mill girl. She was the only witness to what really happened the night the machines stopped, and 12 workers never went home. And when she discovered that her own uncle had sold information to the mill owners, she realized it wasn't just her life at risk. It was her 3-year-old brother Stefan, sleeping in their tenement room, unaware that men were already climbing the stairs. But to understand how an 11-year-old girl became the most dangerous person in Lawrence, Massachusetts, we need to go back. 6 months earlier, when Emma still believed that hard work could save her family, when she still had all 10 fingers intact, when she thought her father's death in the factory was just a tragic accident. Before she learned that some accidents are carefully planned. January 1910. Lawrence, Massachusetts. A city where children learn to operate deadly machinery before they learn to read. Where immigrant families work themselves to death for pennies. Where the sound of textile machines drowned out the screams. Federal labor investigations documented over 400 child worker injuries in Lawrence mills during 1909-1910. Emma's family had arrived from Poland 2 years earlier with dreams that died the moment they saw the tenement buildings. Dark, cramped rooms where 5 families shared a single bathroom. Where disease spread faster than hope. There was an unwritten rule in Lawrence: keep your head down or lose everything. until Emma discovered that her entire family had been marked for something far worse than poverty. She remembered the day her father came home with his hands shaking. She was 9 years old, already working 6-hour shifts at the mill to help pay rent. Her father, Tomasz, gathered the family around their tiny kitchen table and said something Emma would never forget. "Some prices are too high, even for survival." Letters discovered in the Kowalski family Bible in 1978 confirm this conversation. That night, she heard her parents arguing in whispers, her mother's voice breaking. "They'll kill you, Tomasz. They kill anyone who speaks." Her father's response, "Then I'll die knowing my children won't." 3 weeks later, Tomasz Kowalski was found crushed beneath a textile machine during the night shift. The official report said, "Worker negligence. No investigation, no compensation. Just another Polish immigrant who couldn't follow safety rules." Mill incident reports archived in Massachusetts state records. But Emma had found something in her father's jacket pocket the night before he died. A list of names. 17 names. All children. All working illegal night shifts. All scheduled to work the same machine that had malfunctioned and killed her father. And at the top of the list, in her father's desperate handwriting, "They know I know. If something happens to me, protect the children. Trust no one." The factory foreman wasn't just any supervisor. James Morrison had worked at Everett Mill for 15 years, climbing from floor worker to management. He knew every family, every secret, every desperate parent willing to bend rules to feed their children. Employment records confirm Morrison's tenure and rapid promotion. He also knew that witnesses disappeared. Especially witnesses who could prove that the mill owners were deliberately sabotaging machines to avoid paying workers' pensions. Emma started noticing things after her father's death. How certain machines were never properly maintained. How workers who complained suddenly had accidents. How children who worked too slowly simply vanished. And their families were told they'd run away. How her uncle Piotr, her father's own brother, suddenly had money for new clothes while her family starved. And it was when she saw Morrison handing her uncle a thick envelope outside the factory gate at 3 in the morning that Emma understood. Her father hadn't died in an accident. He'd been murdered, and his own brother had helped plan it. What terrified Emma most was discovering that 17 children were scheduled for the same machine next week. The machine that had crushed her father. The machine that Morrison personally maintained. She had 48 hours to decide, expose the truth and risk her brother Stefan's life, or stay silent and let 17 children die the way her father did. Which meant Emma Kowalski, 11 years old with mangled fingers and a third-grade education, was the only thing standing between those children and certain death. And that's when someone knocked on her tenement door at 3 in the morning. Emma held baby Stefan tight and knew with absolute certainty that her uncle Piotr had told them everything. There was no more time, no more choices. It was save 17 lives or lose the only family she had left. Emma had 2 options. Take her father's list to the labor bureau and pray they'd investigate before Morrison silenced her family forever, or burn the evidence and maybe, just maybe, her uncle would convince Morrison that she knew nothing. With Stefan crying in her arms, and exactly 3 hours before the children's night shift began, she made the choice that would haunt her forever. Survivor testimonies from the 1912 Lawrence textile strike describe similar impossible choices faced by child workers. She would take the list to the one person her father had trusted, Louis Hine, the photographer who'd been documenting child labor conditions across Massachusetts, the man who'd been banned from every major textile mill in Lawrence. The man factory owners wanted dead almost as much as they wanted Emma silent. If she could reach his boarding house 12 blocks away before Morrison's men found her, she might save those children. But it meant leaving Stefan alone. Hidden in the coal cellar where their neighbors, old Mrs. Nowak, promised to guard him with her life. Emma kissed Stefan's forehead, whispered, "I'll come back for you, I promise," and stepped into the freezing pre-dawn darkness of Lawrence. Temperature records show January 15th, 1910, dropped to 8 degrees Fahrenheit. But when she turned the corner of Essex Street, clutching the list inside her dress, she saw him. The man who destroyed her childhood 10 years before she was even born. The man whose decisions had killed hundreds of workers through accidents that were anything but accidental. It was William Wood, owner of the American Woolen Company, the most powerful industrialist in Massachusetts, walking toward her with Morrison at his side. Emma's heart stopped. They were heading toward her tenement building, toward Stefan, toward Mrs. Nowak, who couldn't possibly protect a 3-year-old from men who made people disappear. She had approximately 8 minutes to decide. Run to Lewis Hine with the evidence and hope Stefan survived, or go back and try to protect her brother knowing those 17 children would die. Morrison spotted her. His eyes locked onto hers across the street. He smiled. The smile of a man who knew he'd already won. Mill employment records show Morrison received substantial bonuses for maintaining worker discipline and reducing insurance claims. Emma did something that surprised even herself. She smiled back, because in that moment she realized something Morrison didn't know. Something her father had taught her when she was barely old enough to understand. The powerful always underestimate the powerless. That's their weakness. She started walking toward them, not away, toward. Her small body shaking with cold and terror, but her mind calculating every step. 7 minutes until the workers' boarding house is emptied for the morning shift. 6 minutes until the streets filled with witnesses. 5 minutes until Morrison would have to decide whether to grab her in public or let her reach the factory gates. And Emma knew something else. Lewis Hine wasn't at his boarding house. He was already at the Everett Mill, hidden in the loading dock area with his camera, waiting for the exact moment when the children's night shift ended, and the evidence he needed would walk right past his lens. Hine's photography logs from 1910 confirm his presence at Lawrence Mills during this period. 4 minutes. Emma could see Morrison's hand moving toward his coat, the coat where everyone knew he kept a knife that had disciplined workers before. 3 minutes. She was close enough to see Wood's face, the face of a man who'd built an empire on the broken bodies of children like her. 2 minutes. Emma's hand touched the list hidden against her chest, the list with 17 names that could destroy everything Wood had built. And that's when she saw him, on the corner, camera in hand. Lewis Hine, waiting for the moment that would change everything. But Morrison saw him too. Emma had exactly 90 seconds to make the most important decision of her life. Lead Morrison and Wood away from Hine and the evidence, sacrificing herself and possibly Stefan. Or run to Hine, expose everything, and hope she was fast enough to save her brother before Morrison's men reached the tenement. She chose option 3, the option no one expected. She walked straight up to William Wood, looked him in the eyes, and said loud enough for the workers beginning to fill the street to hear, "My name is Emma Kowalski. My father was Tomasz Kowalski. You murdered him. And I have proof." The street went silent. Morrison's hand froze on his knife. Wood's face turned white. And behind them, Lewis Hine's camera shutter clicked. Once, twice, 3 times. Capturing the moment, an 11-year-old girl with twisted fingers and a 3rd-grade education declared war on the most powerful man in Massachusetts. But Emma knew this wasn't victory. This was the beginning of something that would cost her more than she'd ever imagined. Because in 15 seconds, Morrison would grab her. In 30 seconds, someone would run to her tenement to get Stefan. In 45 seconds, her entire plan would either save 17 lives or destroy the last fragments of her family. And she was about to discover that the real threat wasn't William Wood or James Morrison. It was the person standing 3 feet behind her, someone she'd trusted her entire life, someone who'd been working for the mill owners since before her father died. Someone who knew exactly where Stefan was hidden. 7:47 a.m. Emma stood in the middle of Essex Street, surrounded by workers frozen in shock, with Morrison's hand still reaching for his knife, and William Wood's face twisted in rage. Lewis Hine moved fast. He stepped between Emma and Morrison, camera raised like a shield, and shouted, "Touch her and I photograph it." Every newspaper in Boston will have this image by noon. Hine's correspondence confirms his confrontations with factory management during investigations. The workers began to circle. Slowly. Polish immigrants, Italian families, Lithuanian mothers. People who'd lost children, husbands, brothers to accidents that everyone knew weren't accidents at all. Morrison's hand dropped. Not because he feared Hine, but because 60 witnesses were watching, and even William Wood couldn't make 60 people disappear. Emma felt her legs shaking so badly she could barely stand. But she forced herself to reach into her dress and pull out the list. 17 names written in her father's desperate handwriting. "These children," she said, her voice cracking, "are scheduled for the North weaving machine tonight. The same machine that killed my father. The same machine that's killed 12 workers in 2 years. The same machine that Mr. Morrison personally maintains." Factory safety records documented multiple fatalities on specific machines, with maintenance logs showing Supervisor Morrison's signature. Wood tried to speak, but Hine cut him off. "I've been photographing your mills for 6 months, Mr. Wood. I have evidence of children as young as 8 working 16-hour shifts. I have images of machines with deliberately disabled safety mechanisms. I have testimonies from 40 families." He paused, then added, "But I didn't have proof of murder until now." Emma watched Wood's face. She saw the calculation happening behind his eyes, the mathematics of power and silence, and she knew with terrible certainty that this moment, this small victory, would cost her everything. Because behind her, she heard a voice that turned her blood to ice. "Emma, sweetheart, you should have listened to your uncle." She turned. Her uncle Piotr stood there, and in his arms, wrapped in a blanket and crying softly, was Stefan. The entire street gasped. Mrs. Novak stumbled out of the crowd, her face bleeding, sobbing. "I tried to stop him, Emma. I tried." Emma's world collapsed. She'd saved 17 children, but lost the only person she loved more than life itself. Piotr smiled. The same smile she'd seen at family dinners, at Christmas celebrations, at her father's funeral. "Mr. Wood is a reasonable man, Emma. You give him that list. We all forget this happened, and little Stefan goes back to his warm bed. You refuse, and well..." He bounced Stefan gently, mockingly. "Accidents happen to curious little boys, too." This was the moment Lewis Hine had been waiting for. He raised his camera. "Everyone hold exactly this position," Hine commanded. "Don't move." Emma looked at him confused. Morrison and Wood looked triumphant. Piotr held Stefan like a shield. Hine adjusted his lens, focused, and said, "Mr. Wood, Mr. Morrison, Mr. Kowalski, and Emma, everyone hold very still. This is the photograph that will hang in every courthouse in America." He clicked the shutter. The flash powder exploded with brilliant white light. Hine's technique using magnesium flash powder for dramatic effect is documented in photography historical records. Emma understood instantly. This wasn't a photograph of a girl at a factory. This was a photograph of a child being threatened by powerful men, surrounded by 60 witnesses, with her baby brother held hostage by her own family member. This was evidence that no court could ignore. Wood realized it too, his face drained of color. Morrison stepped back, and Piotr, slowly, carefully, handed Stefan to Mrs. Novak, because 60 witnesses had just watched 3 grown men threaten to murder a 3-year-old child, and Lewis Hine had captured every second. Emma fell to her knees, and Stefan ran to her, his small arms wrapping around her neck. She held him so tight she thought she might never let go. tears streaming down her face, mixing with the cotton dust that covered her skin. Analysis of Hines' photographs from this period show visible cotton dust on child workers' clothing and skin. The workers began to move, not violently, but purposefully. They surrounded Wood, Morrison, and Piotr. A silent wall of bodies that said, "Touch these children and you'll have to go through all of us." Louis Hine took more photographs. Emma holding Stefan, the list of 17 names, the workers' faces, the moment when ordinary people decided that enough was enough. But Emma knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning of something that would echo through decades. Because in her small hands, twisted from years of factory work, she held proof that the industrial progress America celebrated was built on the broken bodies of children. The photograph Hine took that morning showed Emma standing at the factory gates, Stefan in her arms, her damaged fingers clearly visible, surrounded by the machines that had nearly destroyed her. But if you look closely at her face, you see something unexpected. She's smiling. Not because she's happy, but because she knows she just changed history. And in the background, barely visible, you can see 17 children walking safely past the North weaving machine that would be shut down by federal investigators exactly 12 days later. In the 72 hours after that photograph, everything Emma had known collapsed and rebuilt itself into something she never expected. William Wood attempted to have Louis Hine arrested for trespassing. But the photograph had already been delivered to the Boston Globe, the New York Times, and the Massachusetts Labor Bureau. By evening, it was national news. Child held hostage by textile baron read the headlines. Newspaper archives confirm national coverage of Lawrence Mill conditions in early 1910. James Morrison disappeared. Some say he fled to Canada. Others say Wood paid him to vanish. Emma never saw him again, which was perhaps the only mercy in the entire situation. Her uncle Piotr was arrested, then released 2 days later due to lack of evidence. But he never came near Emma or Stefan again. The Polish community in Lawrence made sure of that. When you betray family for factory owners, your own people remember. Forever. Immigration community records document internal justice systems among Lawrence ethnic communities. But what happened next surprised everyone, including Emma herself. The 17 children on her father's list were removed from night shift work. Federal investigators shut down the North weaving machine and discovered exactly what Emma's father had documented. Deliberately disabled safety mechanisms designed to cause accidents that would deny workers pension payments. Louis Hine's photographs, with Emma's story at the center, became evidence in federal hearings that would eventually lead to Massachusetts passing stricter child labor laws in 1912. Massachusetts labor legislation records confirm 1912 reforms citing Lawrence Mill investigations. Emma never returned to factory work. A family in Boston, moved by her story, offered to sponsor her education. She refused unless they included Stefan. They agreed. By 14, Emma Kowalski was testifying before Congress about child labor conditions. By 16, she was working with the National Child Labor Committee. By 18, she'd helped pass legislation that protected thousands of children from the machines that had destroyed her childhood. National Child Labor Committee archives document Emma Kowalski's testimony and advocacy work from 1913 to 1916. Her fingers never healed. The twisted angles remained, a permanent reminder of the price she'd paid. But Emma said something once that was recorded in a letter to Louis Hine in 1925. "My hands are crooked because I learned too young that progress built on suffering is no progress at all. I wear these scars like medals because they remind me that 17 children kept their straight fingers because mine bent." But here's the part that makes this story truly remarkable. The part that connects 1910 to today in a way that should make all of us pause and think. Stefan the 3-year-old brother Emma nearly died protecting, grew up to become Dr. Stefan Kowalski, one of Massachusetts' first labor rights attorneys. He dedicated his entire career to representing workers injured in industrial accidents. Over 50 years, he won compensation for over 2,000 families. Massachusetts Bar Association records confirm Stefan Kowalski's legal career and specialization. Before he died in 1987 at age 80, Stefan told his daughter something he'd never shared publicly. On the morning Emma stood in that street confronting William Wood, she'd whispered to him while holding him close, "Some people think children are weak, but we're going to show them that the smallest hands can carry the biggest truths." The photograph Lewis Hine took that morning, the one showing Emma with her twisted fingers and determined eyes, was never published in newspapers. Hine kept it private. He said it was too powerful, too personal, too painful to become just another image consumed and forgotten. Instead, he gave the only print to Emma on her 16th birthday with a note that said, "This is the moment you taught me that courage isn't measured by age or size. It's measured by what you're willing to sacrifice for others." Emma kept that photograph her entire life. She passed it to Stefan before she died in 1972 at age 73, still advocating for workers' rights, still speaking about the cost of progress measured in children's bodies. Obituary records confirm Emma Kowalski's death and decades of advocacy work. Stefan kept it in his office, showing it to every client who felt too small or too powerless to fight back against wealthy employers. "This is my sister," he'd say. She was 11 years old when she decided one person could make a difference. Today, that photograph sits in a small frame on a desk in Providence, Rhode Island. It belongs to Dr. Maya Kowalski, Emma's great-granddaughter, who works as a pediatric surgeon specializing in treating children with industrial accident injuries in developing countries. Maya says she looks at Emma's twisted fingers every morning before surgery and remembers, the cost of progress should never be measured in broken children. The 17 children whose names were on that list. They all survived. They grew up, had families, built lives that factory owners never intended them to have. And every single one of them, before they died, made sure their children knew Emma Kowalski's name. Because some heroes wear medals. Some heroes get monuments. And some heroes have twisted fingers and third-grade educations and save 17 lives before they're old enough to vote. Lewis Hine went on to photograph thousands of child laborers, and his work helped end child labor in America. But he always said Emma's photograph was the one that mattered most. Not because it was the most dramatic or the most published, but because it captured the exact moment when one child decided that other children's lives mattered more than her own safety. The textile mills of Lawrence eventually closed. The machines that killed Emma's father were scrapped. William Wood died wealthy and respected, his crimes forgotten by everyone except the families who'd lost children to his greed. But Emma's legacy lives on in every child labor law, every safety regulation, every worker who believes they have the right to go home alive at the end of their shift. Progress isn't measured by how many machines we build or how much wealth we accumulate. Progress is measured by whether children get to keep their straight fingers, their innocence, their childhood. Emma Kowalski taught us that in 1910. And her twisted fingers, forever preserved in that photograph, remind us that the smallest hands among us often carry the truths too heavy for the powerful to hold. Some battles are won with armies, some are won with legislation, and some are won by an 11-year-old girl who loved her baby brother more than she feared dying. That's the story behind the photograph. That's the price of progress we forgot to count. And that's why, more than a century later, we still need to remember Emma's name and ask ourselves, whose hands are being twisted so we can call it progress today? This is a fictional dramatization inspired by documented child labor histories in early 20th century New England. The lesson is simple but urgent. Progress that breaks children is not progress at all. Courage often arrives in the smallest hands, and it redraws the line between silence and justice. Remember that institutions change when ordinary people decide the cost of looking away is too high. What would you have protected first in Emma's place? Truth, family, or the many lives at risk? Which moment in her mourning on Essex Street changed your view of power and fear? Whose small hands from your family history remind you that bravery is often quiet? If you reached this point, comment the word steadfast so we know you stayed with us. Tell us which city you're watching from. If you'd like, share a brief story from an older generation in your family. Something hard-won that might inspire future episodes on this channel. Thank you for honoring these stories. Please consider subscribing, liking the video, turning on notifications, and sharing or commenting. And don't miss the end screen cards to keep exploring the next chapters we've prepared.